Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of Brothers on the Board, the podcast where we help teachers find peace and fulfillment in their careers. My name's John. This is my brother Wes, and today I think we have got an episode that will be useful to so many teachers, especially teachers who are new to the field or maybe aren't having the year that they want to have. So today's episode, we are talking about resetting expectations in the classroom when things aren't going so hot. So, Wes, how's it going today, man?
It's going great. On break still, loving that, but ready to get back to it and work on those resetting expectations that we have.
Yeah, so like when I think what happens is during the first part of the year, right? You start the school year and you've got a couple of months there where things are really kind of being established, right? That first month of school means so much for a teacher because if you mess that first month up, things really, excuse me, things really go south in a hurry, right? They really don't. It really doesn't go well. So that's the goal here: is looking at when you've messed that first part up and when things have gotten out of control in the room, or at least you feel like you're losing control, where things just aren't going the way you want them to. What are some things that we can do to try to bring everything back together? And we're looking at this more from a classroom expectation in terms of um, behavior expectation more than anything,
hmm
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think it's important that we tell the people that we are drawing from quite a bit of experience. I'm in year 6 now of teaching. What year are you in again?
I'm in year 12. So we've been around for, at least I've especially been around for a minute. I've been at 3 different schools. I've taught at my current school now for 9, 10 years. Been a minute. So I mean, we come at this from 2 different perspectives as well, right? In that we don't teach at the same school, and our schools have very different demographics.
Absolutely, yes, they do. I teach in a little bit more rural school, and you're more urban city. So,
Yeah.
I think that those demographics will definitely play a role in how we manage our classrooms and the tools that we use. We obviously have access to some different
Yeah.
uh, things there. So it's going to be interesting to see the differences between our classrooms. So whenever you're ready, I'm ready.
All right. So we've asked each other to come up with 3 different kind of reset buttons, things that we can do to hopefully change the course of our classroom and change the way that it operates, hopefully to get a desired result. And we have not looked at each other's list. We're just hoping that we're not overlapping each other. So, but it allows us to kind of comment and discuss and try to hopefully add to the conversation for what each other has to say about it. So I'm going to let you go first, as always, and you're going to tell me what's one thing that you do when things aren't going so hot and the classroom is getting a little out of hand, or you really need to try to reestablish those expectations of what you want from the students. What's one thing that you do to make a big difference?
All right. So I think that it something that I've started to realize in my years of teaching is time everything. That's going to be my first one.
Okay.
Everything needs to be timed on a timer. Students do not realize if you don't tell them, how much time is needed for a task, they have a very difficult time managing that. That is, time management's a huge issue since I teach middle school, 7th grade. So timing every single thing. We start out with our warm up. A lot of people call it a bell ringer. 5 minutes on the board. You got 5 minutes to complete the bell ringer. I'm moving on after 5 minutes. We have an activity. after that 10 minutes, and really chunking those activities and making them short, small activities so that students don't lose focus. I know for me, if I say, I have a task to do, like cleaning a house, right? Like when I clean my house, it's the exact same issue where I'm like, oh, I got to clean this house. I have hours to do it and I get overwhelmed. It's the same way. So I've kind of applied that idea of timing everything. So, with my house, I'm going to do 30 minutes in this room, 30 minutes in this room, 30 minutes in this room, and chunking those so that those tasks don't seem as overwhelming, especially in science where I teach. Like we do a lot of projects and the kids can't really, if you just say, hey, I need you to, run an experiment to build a prototype for a bottle rocket or something like that. They don't know how to do all those tasks. So breaking it up into small little tasks and timing it is key to making sure that your classroom is, running smoothly, I think.
No, I agree with you. And, I was going to add in the chunking thing there before you added it in, but yeah, I 100% agree that you keep things short and manageable. And, you mentioned having hours to clean the house, right? And I'm the same way. It's like, okay, I've got, like on this Christmas break, right? Like you have 2 weeks, week and a half, whatever, your district has. It's like, oh my God, I've got all this time. I'm going to clean the house. I'm going to do all these things. And then you play video games for like 7 straight days. And it's like, oh man, like it makes it easy to procrastinate, right? Like when you have an unlimited amount of time and no one holding you accountable, especially, that's when you tend to procrastinate, right? So if you tell students like, here's 4 things you need to do over the course of the next 45 minutes, that's more difficult for them than saying, here's the first thing you need to do. You have 15 minutes. Here's the next thing you need to do. You have, 10 minutes, whatever. And making sure that you break those 4 things down.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, absolutely. I agree. Okay. My first one. And this is, man, my first year of teaching at my current school. I come in, I walk into a co-teacher's classroom. Well, not a co-teacher, but a partner teacher, whatever. And I walk into her room and she's numbering her desks. She's going around, she's taping numbers onto her desks. And I'm just like making fun of her at this point, right? I'm like, what is this? Like, it's a prison? Like, I'd never seen this before. And it's like, why you like numbering desks for? I was going to be that cool teacher. It's just like, hey, come on in, guys. Sit where you want. Don't worry about it. It's all good. Let me tell you, dude, the next year, the second year teaching, the first thing I did is I'm walking around, I'm like putting numbers on every desk. Not this time, right? I'm putting numbers on everything. So my first one is seating charts and numbering the desks. Now, why numbering the desks? What's the purpose of it? What's the point? The point is that it makes it so much easier to create seating charts and to talk to students about their seats, right? Instead of saying, oh, you're in that seat right there. No, third one back. No, on that. No, not that one. The next one, right? It's easier to say you're in desk 13, right? And it's also easier when you have a sub or anything like that you have a seating chart with numbers and everything associated with it. Seating charts are, in my opinion, probably the most important thing that you can establish right off. Well, maybe not necessarily right off the bat because you're trying to learn names and everything else, but it is a very, very important kind of step to getting your classroom in the right. So let's say things haven't been going well so far, right? And you're like, okay, classroom's a little out of hand. Things aren't going the way I want it to go. The first thing that I would do is I would change the seats. Now, I don't just mean where they sit. I would say that maybe even consider changing the arrangement of the classroom, because when they walk in, you know what I mean? Like when students walk in and they see the seats are changed, they're like, whoa, they stop like 3 steps into the door and they just stand there and just look around. Like they're like, oh man, this is different. Like this man means business today. Like something's changed, right? And that's what you want, is you want that change. You want that kind of weird, I don't know, shock factor to where it changes the feel of the room. Because right now the feel of the room for students is not the feel you want them to have, right? You're wanting to change the dynamic of the room. So yes, absolutely, setting seating or changing your seating chart, changing where students seat, and sticking to it is the biggest thing. When students move on you, because they're going to do it, especially if you've not been very strict all year with seating charts, they're going to move around on you, and they're going to test you to see how stern are you going to be with this seating chart, right? And you cannot let that happen. Like they come in, they're like, "Hey, can I sit next to something?" No, and right now, no, you can't. Like I'm going to stick to this like glue, and make sure that everyone understands that this is the thing that we're focused on right now. So, what's your experience with seating charts, and how do you feel about them?
I have been victim to the same thing you have, where I'm going to be the cool teacher. I'm going to let them sit where they want, and
Yeah.
it just doesn't make for the professional setting that we want in a classroom. It's a little too relaxed. Um, so I agree. Now with numbers, I don't number my desks. Instead, I have jobs for each seat. I have numbers for my tables,
Mhm.
so I have clusters of four, and I number the table 1, 2, 3, 4. But then I have jobs within it. So like each of mine are like a business. Each table the students create their own business, and that's their business for the term.
Mhm.
And so they'll be like accountant for table 4 or engineer for table 3. So I mean, it's just another
Yeah.
way of doing it, another way of labeling it. So I completely agree with that, and I am actually guilty of changing seats a little too much, uh, where I change the arrangements of my desks a lot because we're doing projects, we're doing different stuff. When we're having tests, I usually like to move them, and I have found that I overdo it sometimes, and the students lose that because, like, part of teaching obviously is consistency, right? We want the students to feel a bit of consistency in the classroom, and I have been known in the past to change my seating charts around so much that it actually brings a little bit of chaos with it, where the students they come in every day thinking things are going to be a little different. So there is a level of consistency that you need with that, but I agree 100%. You need seating charts, and I would even argue, like you said at the beginning of the year, maybe not because you're learning names. I feel like the seating chart at the beginning of the year is essential because it helps you know those names, helps you remember those names and where they sit. So I think even out of the gate, even if you don't know these students, I would make a seating chart. I do it every year, and that just sets that expectation in that classroom where they know that they are going to sit in that seat, right? There's never a moment where they'll be like, "Oh, you let me sit here one day, or you let me move one day, or you didn't have a seating chart at one
Yeah.
time." No, I've had a seating chart this whole time, and I've been very consistent with it, right? And I think consistency is key there. So,
Yeah. So I want to clarify two things. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. So, first thing, yeah, with the groups, right? So, like currently, my classroom, we have groups of four, and yeah, we have the groups numbered, group one, group two, group three, and we have the same situation roles within those groups, right? Um, I know that certain classrooms have work in different ways, but if you ever seats in rows, obviously numbering them will work. But yeah, it's just a different system for doing it. So yeah, I agree with that. The next thing, now when I say seating chart at the beginning of the year, um, I guess what I meant by that was intentional seating instead of like alphabetical order. So what I will do at the beginning of the year, and I should have clarified this, is I'll put them in alphabetical. So yeah, I have a seating chart. It's just that right now my seating chart has nothing to do with what alphabetical order of your name. Now it has to do with I'm going to take these four students and pair them together because I know that they can work well together. Like they're not best buddies in that they're going to sit and play the whole time, but they're not like mortal enemies to where they're going to fight with each other the entire time, right? It's like, oh no, you've put me with my worst enemy. All right, not that kind of thing. So like, yeah, you're right. You do need a scene chart, I think, at the beginning just to kind of help learn names, and that's what we always tell them, right? It's like I need to know. Like, do you ever have that problem where like I know your name when you're in my class at the beginning of the year and you're sitting in your seat, but as soon as you get in the hallway, it's just like your identity completely changed. I have no clue who you are
Oh,
now.
dude,
Like,
I am the worst with names. Like, I am awful with names, but and like as soon as they leave that door, like I'm like, I think I know, but I always hit them with the trick where I'm like, "What's your last name?"
yeah, I do that. Or or I'll look at their laptop, like their Chromebook. It's got their name on the top of it. I'll look at that, or I'll say, "How do you spell your name?" I'll do that one too. How do you spell your name? Like, and then they'll start spelling it. I'm like, oh, okay, that's it.
I've done that
Like,
one before too. That's another one that
yeah,
I hit them
that's
with.
yeah, that's a good. That's always a good one. You ever have the kid that you call them by the wrong name for like 2 months and they never say anything to you, and then finally you hear another kid say their name, and you're like, wait a minute, have I been calling you the wrong name? And they're like, yeah, I didn't want to correct you. And I'm like, I mean, you get two types of kids, right? You get the ones that get really offended, like just completely mad when you mispronounce their name or you call them the wrong name. And then you have the kid that just doesn't say anything. They just roll with it. Like, it's like, what do you mean your name's this? I've been calling you David all year, right? Like, it's like, yeah, it's let me
Yeah,
know. Let me know I'm calling you the right
I've
thing.
done that many
So,
times.
all right. Seating charts, done and dusted. I do agree. Oh, pro tip: if you are going to number your desks, or you're going to put, I know we used to do like the jobs, kind of like you were talking about. We would put like a triangle or a circle, or we would put a shape or something on the desk that showed like this is the job. So if you're a square, then you're like the engineer or whatever, right? Or if you're a triangle, then you're the group facilitator, whatever
No
it
one
is.
wants to be the
Um,
square. I mean,
I know, right? I know.
where my
As
squares
soon as I
at?
said it, I was like, who's the squares in the room? Um, so one thing that I will say is putting your little sticker or whatever that you're putting on the seat, put it on the back of the chair. Don't put it on the desk, because what happens when you put it on the desk?
I know exactly what happens. It gets peeled up.
It gets
It
picked
gets
apart over the
destroyed.
course of the next few days, or they color it with like a pencil or a pen. They just sit and they don't even realize they do it. And I'll be honest, there's been times where I've been sitting in my own room talking to teachers, and I'm sitting there picking at it. Like, it's just hard not to do. So, yeah, putting it on the back of the seat to where it's still visible, you can still find it, but you're just not compelled to sit there and just pluck it off is something that I think is useful. Unless you feel like, man, just scraping those things off and trying to restick them every week and a half, right? Like, unless you want to do that, put them on
Unless
the back.
that's your thing.
All right. Yeah, and you're like, all right, baby, time to replace the stickers again. All right. Number two. Well, for you, your second one. What you
All
got for me?
right. So my second one, uh, I think going off my first one, timing everything. I think it's you have to communicate very clearly exactly what you expect from students. So voice level uh, is a huge one that I think you need to definitely focus on at the beginning of the year. I'm talking every activity, those small activities that I'm telling you about, voice level along with every single one of them. What I do is I always have like a slideshow on the board. It has a link to a timer. It has what the activity is going to be that day, the description for the activity, and then it also has the voice level. 0, 1, 2, with every single one of them. I'm talking every bell ringer we do, even if it's 5 minutes long. Level 0. You're not talking during this time. I want to know what you know. Don't want to know what the people next to you want to know. So being very clear and very intentional about having those voice levels. And for those of you that may not have heard of voice levels, some of our newer teachers maybe, um, and I know some people do it a little differently depending on the place, but I always do 0 is no talking. You are quiet. You're working on your own independent work. 1 is at a whisper. You're talking to your group, but I shouldn't be able to hear you as I'm walking around the room. Is how I always communicate that to the students. And then 2, which we don't do that often, is usually like for presenters or someone who is talking to the entire class, is how I've always done it. So we usually sit around that 1 range, talking in our groups quietly, trying not to talk over top of people. Obviously, you have 30 plus kids in the room, so it's going to get loud, and just reminding them over and over, hey, remember voice level 1, I shouldn't be able to hear your conversation over top of everyone else. um, I think that is very essential in um, managing a classroom, is setting the expectations of the noise, because we all know, you start an activity, because we've all been guilty of it at some point, where we're like, all right, you all are doing, whatever, this worksheet, or you're doing whatever activity is, and it starts out silent, and the kids start looking around, and then they start talking, and then it starts getting louder and louder, because you didn't set that expectation, because they don't know what to expect. And then at the end, it's just like chaos, like it's just everyone is like yelling. Um,
It's like a
yeah,
volcano.
it just slowly builds over time. So just making sure you're
I,
very clear on that.
I think what happens is like they so initially it starts out and it's fine, but then like once one person gets a little too loud, now you can't hear what the person next to you saying, so you get louder or whatever, and it just kind of spirals out of control. And I will add to that in terms of making sure that you're talking about noise level. You can't make assumptions that seventh graders or just students in general know what you want. Right. It's easy for us to look at it and say, okay, if you're being a good student, this is what it should look like in our head, right? We know what we want in our head. And then sometimes we think that students should know that. And then we watch for it and it doesn't happen and we're like, what are you doing? Like, this is not what I want, but they don't know what you want. So you have to be very explicit with your directions. So like we use a thing called champs, and I know a lot of schools use champs. Um, Conversation, help, assignment, movement, and participation. So before we do any kind of activity, we try to champ that activity. What is the conversation level? What do you do if you need help? Right? Those are the types of things that you do so that they understand that this is the expectation for this specific assignment, right? And making sure that we follow through on that. But yeah, noise level definitely um, something to focus on. I do want to ask you though. I do want to ask you this. Have you ever been in a room like 20, 25 teachers at a professional development?
Teachers are the worst students.
It amazes me. It amazes me how you'll be in a room with like 20 some teachers and it'll be like really loud in a room and it's like, man, we spent all day yelling at kids to be quiet, to keep it down or whatever, and we are like as loud as they are, right? But I mean, it just kind of, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just shows that when you have 30 people in a room talking, it gets loud. It can get loud. Um, Getting that perfect level one is hard, right? I can give you a three. Kids all screaming. I can give you a zero. Everybody's dead quiet. Getting that perfect productive conversation level of volume with a 30, 12-year olds is tough. But it's something to strive for. It's something you just keep working at. You keep finding ways to try to remind them and put out small fires when things are getting a little too loud per group or whatever. You know, there's ways, and we'll continue to discuss this and ways that you can do that. But definitely noise level is something to
And
focus on.
I even know teachers who have like a sound meter. They'll put it up on the board, and like if the sound meter gets too high, the students know they're getting too loud. And that's something that's always been kind of fun. I've thrown that out a few times. So.
Yeah, I've seen that before. I've messed around with it a little bit, but I've never really kind of. The question I think becomes, what happens when it gets too loud, right? So I mean, you could put it up there and just say, well, this is so you are aware of how loud you're being, and hopefully maybe you can use your group leaders as your facilitators as a way of doing this and saying, hey, group leaders, you need to be aware of the volume and you need to be keeping track of that or whatever. And if you see that it's too loud, you need to just remind your group, hey guys, we're being a little too loud. We need to bring it down a little bit. And just kind of putting that as one of the roles within the context of the group. That could be something. Of course, there's always the, hey, we're our classes, we've got a point system, right? And you lose a point if you guys get into the red up here or something like that. Of course, you got that one kid that's going to scream at some point and set that thing off. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's always a tool. It's always something that you can look at trying and seeing how it goes. All right, my next one, my number two. Pick one thing. Pick one thing and build from there. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is, if your classroom is in complete disarray, and and the teachers that are listening to this who are in this situation, they know what I'm talking about. When you're on your way to work and you're like, just you're nervous, you have this feeling, kind of fear of the unknown. You're in the classroom and you get this kind of burning feeling in your face where it's like things feel like they're getting out of control. Kids are out of their seats. Things have really went south, right? If you're in that situation where it's like, I have so many things wrong that I'm struggling to fix everything, right? I would say pick one thing and really focus on that one thing until you get that down, and then move on to something else. Instead of saying, I'm going to come in here today and just have an immaculate classroom where everything runs completely autonomously. It's fantastic. Instead of saying that, come in and say, today I'm going to make sure that everyone is in their assigned seat and that they're sitting down. Like that's it. That is the goal. Now, yeah, I'm going to teach. Yeah, I'm going to go through my lesson. It's just that is my absolute non-negotiable today, and that is what I'm heavily focused on. And they need to understand that if you're not going to sit in this seat, then we're going to have problems, right? There's going to be issues. Like that is the one thing that I'm focused on today. Once students realize that, oh wait, this is he or she, they mean business by this, I'm gonna stay in my seat, right? Once you get that down, then you can kind of move into, well, now I'm going to move into noise level, or I'm going to move into movement around the room, which is, I mean, similar, I guess, to seating, or rigor of instruction, whatever. Like, I'm going to focus, this is my goal, and then I'm going to slowly build from there. And then maybe in a week or two, you kind of get things sort of where you want it to be, right? What do you think about this idea of kind of focusing on certain things?
Oh, I love it. That's something. You're not going to be perfect at every single thing, all the time. So making sure that you are intentional about one thing at a time will definitely help. Not to say that we're going to just completely ignore all the other stuff, uh, but our main
No, no.
focus is on this one thing, right? So I definitely agree, and I've been known to, even in the past, especially I started this probably 2 years ago or something, where at the beginning of the year and then going back after break, I'm going to start doing it again where when a class ends, I usually will tell them like all right, we did this really well today. Like you all did a really good job. And I will find something. I mean, even if it's, you
Perfect.
all did
Yes.
a really good job of walking through the door this morning. Like, even if that's the only thing I can find, right? But I find something good. And then
Mhm.
all right, but here's something we can work on for tomorrow. Our class's focus is this, right? We're going to focus
Yes.
on this tomorrow. You all, we were kind of loud today. Tomorrow, we're going to try better. We're going to focus on that. So I think very, very important to hit a positive and then throw in the what we can work on. Um,
Yeah.
so that's something that I've done in my classroom. So I definitely agree. Focus on one thing at a time, because it's, again, I get overwhelmed. I don't, and I think a lot of people do that. There's just so much that a teacher has to do. You know,
Yeah, you're juggling
you are,
everything.
yeah, juggling so many different things, and it's very nice to be like, all right, I'm going to focus on this one thing, and that's what I'm going to focus on. So
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to raise, in that what I have found, and I know that this really is teacher dependent, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of opinions about this, but what I have found is that positive reinforcement, for me, works better than negative reinforcement. And what I mean by that is, okay, I want to use Class Dojo as an example. Okay, so Class Dojo, for those people who have never used it, You can give positive points and it makes a really, kind of a loud dinging sound in the room, or you can give negative points and it has this really kind of obnoxious like sound that goes off in the room. What I have found is that giving positive points creates a better effect on the room than negative points. So what happens is when you give a negative point, and I'm not saying that you should never give them, because I think it's important because it creates a lot of data and things that you can look at and to see what students are doing and stuff like that. But when you give a negative point, everyone looks at, if you have it up on the screen or something like that, the first thing everyone does is look around to see who it was and why they got it. It ends up becoming a little bit of a distraction. But if you give a positive point, then everyone immediately thinks, oh, he's looking for people that are doing what they should do. Now I can get a positive point, right? And they start doing kind of their work or whatever, that it gets them back on task just from hearing the dinging sound. The same thing can be said with narrating. If I'm trying to get people's attention on me, and a lot of people are talking or whatever it is, sometimes I'll say, okay, I'm looking for people who are looking at me. All right, I see one, I appreciate it. 2 people, 3, 4, thank you. And as I'm counting them, you can see everyone starting to look at me one at a time until everyone's looking at me, right? This is something I think is really useful. So yeah, pointing out things that students are doing well typically works, in my experience, better than pointing out the things that people are doing poorly.
Yeah, you ever have you give a consequence like the dojo and it makes the noise and then everyone in the room is like, ooh, and
Oh yeah.
you're like, no, that was not my intention, but now I have to give a consequence to everyone because you're all off task now.
Then you hit that select all button. Boom. It's like -30, everybody.
Yeah.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, I think we're on your number 3.
We are,
right?
yes. My number 3.
Right, your
my
number
final
3.
one.
Go ahead.
So going off of, again, I feel like I've kind of went off the same kind of thing here, and basically it's how I structure my PowerPoint the students see, just being very clear on my instructions, and telling them what it looks like to complete a task. I feel like that is a very easy thing for us, again, like you said before, for us to expect the students to know what it looks like, but not always the case, right? And I'm talking very detailed. Where do you turn this assignment in at? Are you turning it in online? Are you turning it in, I know a lot of people use technology. Some people still use paper. I sometimes will do a paper assignment as well. Where are you putting it? Are you putting it in a bin? Are you putting it on my desk? Is someone coming around and collecting it? What does a exemplary example of this assignment look like, and giving them an idea of what it looks like, because then I know I've had in my classroom, when it comes to hitting the reset button in chaos, a lot of it comes from the assignment itself. A lot of the times it'll be a difficult assignment. I wasn't clear in my instructions. Students just give up because if they don't know what they're doing, well, I mean, I'm just gonna start talking to my friend. I'm gonna start avoiding the task. I'm gonna do something goofy to get some people to laugh, and that's the case. I find if I don't give examples on the board of what it looks like, what I'm expecting, this is what my answers. Now, obviously, I'm not giving them like an answer key or something like that, but if we're doing a written response, we do a lot of written responses. Here's what the written response looks like. That's a 4, right, on a rubric. Just so you have an idea of what it looks like. Or, here's how you complete this task. I think is very, very important, and being very clear in every instruction of that to completion. What do you think?
Well, we're continuing this theme of students can only do what you want when they know what you want, right? And you can't make the assumption that they know what you want, because it's easy to forget that they're 12 or 13 or 8 or whatever age they are, right? It's easy to forget that. So no, absolutely. I think having exemplary examples of an assignment I think that having rubrics and going through those rubrics, now for me, it's a little different. Well, not necessarily different, but I would say in some ways it's easier. I'm an English teacher, right? So we do a lot of essays. And it's like having students grade example essays using the rubric so they understand how the rubric works and what their assignment should look like. Because when students understand what they're doing and they understand the expectation, then they're going to work better. They're going to follow expectations better because you're right. When they don't understand, that's when they start acting up in a lot of cases. And for us, if you have a day, and we all have these days, where you go in and it's like bell one, awful. Makes fuel adjustments. Bell two, terrible. Bell three, terrible. And it's just the whole day just does not go well. That may be a day where you look at what you did that day, the assignment, and you say, you know what? Maybe it's me. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's the assignment. Maybe it's you have to consider that. In that maybe you weren't clear with the directions, or maybe the assignment was too difficult. Maybe it was the directions weren't clear. Whatever it was. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. All right, moving on to my number 3, and I think the last one. And I'm going to, I was going to talk about positive reinforcement a little bit, but I've already discussed that just a tad. I'm going to say this. Try not to rely on raising your voice, and try to make sure you don't make threats that you can't follow through on. You know where I'm
I
going
know
with that?
exactly where you're going with that. Yes.
Yeah. So you have some teachers who you just hear them all the time. They just yell constantly. And what happens is when you are constantly raising your voice, it becomes white noise eventually for students. They just start ignoring it, right? And basically, it is no longer effective. Now you're just the teacher that yells. It doesn't. They just ignore it. You also have to realize that for a lot of students, they have parents who are constantly yelling at them anyway. That's what they're used to for a lot of students. Not all of them, but for a lot of students. That's just the home they come from. That's what they're used to. So giving them an adult in their life where you are a rational, reasonable adult, I think is important. Now, am I saying never raise your voice? No, that is not what I'm saying. There are times where you need to get everybody's attention, or where it's, rare examples. I will say in the last like 2 or 3 years, I have raised my voice and yelled at a class like 2 times in the last like 2 or 3 years. And I will be honest, both times I regretted it. Both times after that bell, I looked back and was like, man, I lost my cool, right? I lost my temper, right? But I will say this, they were chill after that because they know that I'm a very, very calm person and that I'm very laid back. And if I get very frustrated, if I'm raising my voice, things are serious right now. I need to stop, right? Because that's just not me. But I will say definitely, keep an eye on your voice level. What do you think about that?
I completely agree with that. And I'm a loud person to begin with. Like, there's been times where my teacher, that like my one of my coworkers that works near me, she'll be like, "Hey, we could hear you today. Like, we heard your whole lesson, like through the wall, because I'm just extremely loud."
Yeah.
So I just, I think it's with me, since I am so loud. It's about tone, making sure that
Yeah.
tone
I will.
changes.
I'm glad you mentioned that because some people are just loud people. Now, and I don't mean loud people. Okay, I mean yelling and screaming, and when you're
Yeah.
frustrated, not just the way you
Yeah, I
talk.
know exactly
Right?
what you mean. So yeah, so just focusing on that tone. But yeah, I agree. And I think that we have all had those students come back from like another class, and they're like, "Oh, all that teacher does is yell," and you don't want to be that teacher.
Yeah.
You don't want to be that person. I'm like, do they talk about me like that? Like, I'm sure they do.
Of course they
I'm
do.
sure.
Of
I'm
course they
sure I'm
do.
the teacher
I'm
that
like, Well, I know you guys are already talking about me.
So, I agree, and I think that the big one, like you said, I want to add to is not making false promises with consequences. Right? Do not get into a struggle uh, with a student over like a power struggle, right? We like to call it a power struggle with a student. And you know, the quickest way to completely ruin your credibility and completely ruin your classroom is to make a threat that you cannot follow through with. Right.
Yes.
Absolutely. So just that is number
If
one.
anyone else, if anyone else in this class talks, I'm giving all of you an after school detention or something like that. And like, that you know as well as everyone in the room, like you're not going to call every parent and schedule every one of those detentions or whatever, unless you are serious, like you're really going to do it. You've got to be careful what you say in terms of what you're going to do. Now, I'm not saying that some teachers won't. I know that some teachers will definitely do that, but if you're going to say something, you better be prepared to do it when it comes time.
Yep. Yep. You gotta follow through on it. Uh yeah.
Yeah, always follow through.
So don't pick a battle that you're not willing to wholeheartedly fight, you know?
Yeah. And you know, I'm glad you brought up the power struggle because that's something that should definitely be on our list. Is you don't get into power struggles with students in the room. You don't win that fight. You don't win that argument. You know, the whole like, I think a lot of teachers, you know, they want to get the last word, right? And always that's not always that important, right? It's just like I would just repeat myself over and over and over. You know, like, hey, you need to be doing this, and they'll be blah blah blah. Okay, you need to just do this. You just need to do this. I'm not going to sit and argue with you about it. Okay, I'm not going to fight with you about it. But for the most part, you try to avoid power struggles, and really picking your battles, I think, is important as well. Um, you know, if you're having a battle about you know, something really really small or petty, may not be worth it,
Mhm.
right? Maybe something that you can just kind of overlook or whatever for currently. So now I will say this, and this is something I do agree with though, is and this is coming from a teacher that I work with, and I have a lot of respect for. You know, he says that when you focus on the little things, the big things don't happen, and I agree with that a lot. You know, when you have, for example, a no hood policy in your room or your school or whatever, like students can't wear hoods, right? Um, if you ignore the hoods, then other things will start to follow. But if they come in, you're like, hey, everyone, hoods off, right? Take your hood off. You can't wear a hood. Like if you focus on those small things, then a lot of times the big things don't happen as long as you take care of those small things. I do agree with that to a degree. What do you think?
Hmm. That's an interesting. I'm trying to wrap my head around that one. I mean, I agree uh, that you know you if you focus on the smaller things, they realize, like you said before, like they mean business. We're not going to test it. Um, so I could see that argument.
What is it? It sets a tone, right, for the room.
Yeah, yeah.
In that there are expectations here, right? The rule is no hoods, and I will tell them, you know, personally, I don't care if it were me and it was my decision, then the hood is what it is, right? I wouldn't care that much. But that if that's the rule, that's the rule. You can't wear a hood, right? So I think that making sure that it really boils down to students understanding that in this classroom it's a professional environment and there are expectations,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's something that we have to always consider.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree on now that I've wrapped my mind around it. Yeah, focusing on the small things definitely. Um,
Now, I will say, and I'm going to kind of stick with what I said a second ago. I have had kids who've came in the past, and when I said pick my battles, and I have a kid who maybe they've got a hood up, they don't normally have a hood up. Maybe something's a little odd about that kid's day, right? Maybe they've got a bad headache or a migraine or something. Like, I'm still human, right? I may pull that kid aside in a little bit and be like, hey man, are you good? And they'll be like, oh yeah, my head's killing me, whatever. I may not be like, hey, well, got to take that hood off and get your head up and get to work. I may say, hey man, listen, I get it. Just give me a little something, right? Try to, try to work on the first question there just a little bit. Just do the best you can,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm not picking a battle. I'm not fighting with them about it because, we're human, right? Um, and I have kids that, to be honest, they'll wear their hood. It's a sense of protection for them. They don't, they have anxiety. They don't like being seen, right? And I know those students. And I see them, and that's a question that I have to answer sometimes. Now you fight the battle of in between making sure that, oh well, if you do it for one, you have to do it for everyone else, versus being empathetic and being human, right? Um, so I think it's something that we always have to. It's a battle that we're always fighting as teachers for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
I agree.
All right. I think we have done it. We have made it through our things. Honestly, as we went through this, there were so many other things that came to mind that we could have discussed that I'm like, man, I should have put that on my list and had a conversation about that. But those will be things for future John and Wes conversations. So that'll do it for today. Next time, we're having a conversation about Chat GPT. That's going to be the next topic of conversation for episode 2. And we will see everyone next time. Thank you guys for listening, and have a good day.